Conejos, muy buenos días, muy buenas tardes, muy buenas noches tengan todos ustedes. Sean bienvenidos una vez más a su canal, El Conejo Blanco. Mis conejos, el día de hoy vamos a estar analizando unos videos de David Icke. Vamos a ver toda esta información que David Icke ha estado exponiendo durante años, cómo ha estado en conferencias, en podcasts, en entrevistas, muchísimas. Vamos a analizar sus libros, vamos a ver esos libros que tiene David Icke que te recomiendo que vayas a leer, a investigar, porque tiene toda esta información de cómo funciona el sistema, cómo el sistema nos controla, nos manipula, cómo todo empieza desde el sistema educativo, esas mentiras que nos dicen, cómo implantan ideas y nos hacen ver el mundo de una simple manera. Entonces, si tú te sales de ese flujo de pensamiento, si tú quieres ver la vida de diferente manera, ya te tachan de que eres el loco, ¿no? Esa cárcel perfecta donde los mismos prisioneros detienen a los suyos. No dejan los prisioneros que otro salga de la cárcel. Es una cárcel mental que nos pone el sistema. Entonces David Icke nos explica muy bien cómo funciona este sistema corrupto que rigen las logias Illuminati, los cuales le meten miedo a la población, como todo el tiempo están con ese sistema de problema, reacción, solución, en el cual ellos mismos le ponen un problema a la sociedad para que la sociedad reaccione con miedo, más que nada, y piden una solución la cual ya tenían previamente preparada. Ejemplo, el bicho 19, problema, hay una pandemia, reacción, la gente tiene miedo, quiere una solución para seguir con su vida normal. Solución, aquí está esto, váyanse, pónganselo y todo sigue normal. Como el 90%, 80% de la población se metió eso. Óxido de grafeno reducido, el cual ya hemos visto que es todo para un mismo control de este nuevo orden mundial, del cual también explica David Icke. Esa única moneda, ese único gobierno, ese control masivo de tus pensamientos, de lo que te llega de información, el sistema educativo, incluso esa conexión con la inteligencia artificial, la música, ¿no? Como también ya hemos visto cómo nos generan ciertas frecuencias que nos transmiten para cambiar nuestra vibración, para hacernos sentir ciertas emociones. Entonces, David Icke habla de todos estos temas. Hice una compilación de sus videos. Yo creo que vamos a necesitar otro video más porque si no se va a hacer muy muy largo porque tiene muchas entrevistas. David Icke ha estado dando muchas conferencias, es muy famoso, tiene pues sus libros, te digo. Entonces vamos a ver cómo habla pues de este sistema corrupto, de nuestro cerebro reptil, ¿no? De cómo nos controlan desde ese cerebro reptil, desde ese adoctrinamiento, desde el sistema educativo, la escuela, la historia que nos cuentan, nuestro origen, nuestros poderes ocultos, la telepatía, los viajes astrales, ese contacto con el mundo espiritual del cual nos bloquean, y cómo también explica David Icke de cómo la pirámide Illuminati funciona, cómo imprimen el dinero de la nada, cómo los bancos pueden crear el dinero de la nada, que tú vas, pides un préstamo y pueden hacer 10 veces más de ese préstamo y luego el otro banco le pide al otro y es una cadena así en la cual imprimen dinero de la nada y estamos todos viviendo simplemente de una deuda generada a los años en la cual toda la población está endeudada para pagarles a estos mismos que controlan la pirámide, que son los que generan el dinero, generan la deuda. Entonces, vamos viendo cómo todo se entrelaza, desde el sistema educativo, la música, los gobiernos, cómo todo es para un sistema de control, tanto pues político, mental, económico, ¿no? En el cual nos ven como unos esclavos, pero ese es el chiste. El liberarte de la Matrix, dejar de ser un esclavo, es tener todo esto consciente y decidir cambiar el sistema. Porque todos juntos podemos cambiar el sistema. Si todos empezamos a hablar de que el sistema está corrupto, de que el dinero lo crean de la nada, generan deuda y al final ellos son los que van a tener esa deuda ganada, es darse cuenta de cómo funciona el sistema, de cómo los políticos, los gobernantes que nos muestran, pues no son los verdaderos gobernantes, ¿no? Los presidentes, ¿quién les manda? ¿Quién le manda a Trump? ¿Quién le manda a Putin? Ellos no son los que gobiernan realmente ni los que toman estas decisiones de gran escala. Entonces, vamos allá con los videos de David Icke para que veas de todo esto que habla, cómo lo ha explicado él durante años atrás y cómo nos estamos moviendo, cómo el mundo se está moviendo a ese nuevo orden mundial, a ese único gobierno, una moneda digital. Y pues bueno, vamos a ver esos videos de David Icke, que hay mucho que analizar y vamos a necesitar una segunda parte porque son muchos temas de los que habla David Icke y en los cuales podemos ir abordando cada uno bien a fondo para que lo vayas viendo.
Unit, as this guy, I won't say it again, but this guy was talking about all the Satanists in banking. And this guy said, the system is broken, it was built this way. Of course it was. You know, let's get this right. I go to a bank, yeah, and you lend me money that doesn't exist, and then I pay you interest on it, plus the bloody principal, right? Let me get me head round that. But that's what's happening. They've created a system, because of the dynamic of the politicians representing the banks, legislation has been passed that allows banks to lend at least 10 times what they have on deposit, fractional reserve lending. So every time we borrow $50,000 from a bank, or putting $50,000 into a bank, let's put it the other way, they can now lend 10 times that, which doesn't exist, to other people that come and want a loan. It's interesting when you follow this around the banking system, one loan. I go for a loan. Can you lend me £50,000? Yes, I can. Why were you going to lend it me? I'm going to type £50,000 into your account. Where's it coming from? Oh, just type it in. That's no problem. So, okay, now you got £50,000, right? Which we have created out of nothing, fresh air. Okay, so you get it. In theory, these figures on your screen. You see a car you like. You go over here. And you say, I'll pay for the car. You give him 10 grand or 5 grand for the car, whatever. He then takes that money and he puts it in his bank. Now this bank can lend 10 times that, which has come from this, which was created out of bugger all in the first place. And when you follow this through the banking system, the amount of money that can be created from a single loan that was out of nowhere in the first place is absolutely bloody fantastic. In debt. This is what this is about. Debt is control. So let's get young people up to their neck in debt, massive debt, which they then spend the rest of their lives paying off. Just to be bloody programmed with the system's version of events. This is a great list. This is what you learn from school. Truth comes from authority. Intelligence is the ability to remember and repeat. Accurate memory and repetition are rewarded. Non-compliance is punished. Conform intellectually and socially. This guy, H.L. Mencken, said, the aim of public education is not to spread enlightenment at all. It is simply to reduce as many individuals as possible to the same self-level, where they studied the personality changes as people went through school. And they found this, a massive decline in creativity as children have become less emotionally expressive, less energetic, less talkative and verbally expressive, less humorous, less imaginative, less unconventional, less lively and passionate, less perceptive, less apt to connect seemingly irrelevant things, dots, less synthesizing and less likely to see things from a different angle. That's what they found happens as people go further and further into system. And now they want to take this system and they want to make the kids pay for it with debt for much of the rest of their lives, right? Now, here's my suggestion, here's my question. What do you want to bloody do it for? What do you want to do it for? Why do you want to go through this system and have them tell you what you must think about every bloody thing? And if you don't tell the exam paper what it's told you to believe, then you won't create it. And it will be based on a world central bank, they're already talking about it, which would dictate all global finance. What are they doing in the European Union? Stepping stones, totalitarian tiptoe. They're saying as a result of the financial crisis in Europe, which these have created, we must have centralized control of all the banking in Europe. And then you look at the people who are coming forward to solve the problem. When we had the crash in 2008, the Bush Treasury Secretary was Hank Paulson, who'd come a few years earlier from Goldman Sachs, where he was Chief Executive Officer. The new head of the European Central Bank is Mario Draghi. Mario Draghi is a former employee of Goldman Sachs. The guy currently unelected and running Italy, Mario Monti, is a former executive of Goldman Sachs. An end to national sovereignty, all justified by saving the world, by the way. An end to national sovereignty, state planning and management of all land resources, ecosystems, deserts, forests, mountains, oceans and fresh water, agriculture, rural development, biotechnology, and ensuring equity equals slavery. The state is to define the role of business and financial resources. Abolition of private property is not sustainable, they say. Here we go again. How many times has this come up? Restructuring the family unit, children to be raised by the state, people told, this is what Aldous Huxley said in Brave New World, people told what their job will be, major restrictions on movement, creation of human settlement zones, I'll get to them in a minute, mass resettlement as people are forced to vacate land where they live for reasons I'm coming to, dumbing down education, achieved a long time ago. Fear this, fear that. Insecurity, anxiety, that's what it's doing to manipulate our perception and hold us in a low vibrational state, therefore the moon matrix. So one of the ways that we can, just on a daily basis, is disconnect from the lizard brain, and therefore what it's connecting us to, is to, simple thing, don't count to 10, count to 50. And if you're still wound up and about to hit somebody, count another 50. Because what the reptilian brain does is it doesn't think, it reacts. That's why it's so fast. It doesn't have to think, just reacts. Now, the other parts of the brain, like the neocortex, they think things through, so it takes longer than the reptilian brain. This is why we react to something, reptilian brain, and then maybe a minute later, 2 minutes later, maybe half an hour later, the visual cortex has thought this through, and we go, oh my God, I overreacted, didn't I? Did I really say that? Oh my God. Some of the things you do when you follow your intuition are seen as, oh, I think I'm possibly an example of this, are seen as crazy and mad and lunatic and dangerous and all that stuff. And what happens then when you do that and you get that reaction is that the head kicks in, the mind, which wants to protect its preeminence that it's had up to this point, puts its arms together and says, see what happens when you don't listen to me, see the trouble you've got into? And it's like, yeah, okay, and you come back into mind. But if you stick with it, and you take what comes as a result of expressing your uniqueness and expressing your intuitive knowing, then eventually things happen, good things, great things sometimes, that happen not despite what you did and the reaction you got, but because of it. It's not about learning anything new. We're all knowing if we can access that level of ourselves. It's unlearning the programming that has kept us from that level of awareness that we truly are. And therefore, because we're dealing with all possibility at the core of our being, that's what we are, we need a blank sheet of paper. All preconceived idea needs to go. All preconceived belief needs to go. And let information, intuitive knowing, decide what we think about things and feel about things rather than preconceived idea. It's not possible becomes, well, let's see if it's possible on the basis of the evidence, the basis of the information, the basis of how I feel. And then suddenly we're not saying, no, that's possible, I'm going to shut that out by reflex action. We're going to look at it. And when you do look at it, as I know from experience, what seems to be crazy to start with starts to take on changing information, is starting to be activated within the Earth grid and, of course, within the human grid. This new information is starting, for those that open themselves to it, instead of stay closed in density, because if you stay in a dense state, then these higher vibration energies are not going to impact like you if you open yourself to them and connect with them. But those that are awakening, this new photon information, this more expanded perception, we're starting to integrate it, and we're starting to get insights from it, because it contains information that hasn't been around in this period we've been through. Now it is, and suddenly it's like, oh, I see it now, oh, I get it now. Why didn't I get it before? Because you're now decoding a totally different level of information that's becoming available, and it's encouraging us, it's pressing us, it's urging us to open to all that is and change the way we perceive the world. At least sheep need a sheepdog to keep them in line. Humans have out-sheeped the sheep because we keep each other in line. We don't need the sheepdog. We have sheepdogs called parents and teachers and politicians and peer pressure. When we're thinking of expressing our uniqueness, we're not thinking, oh, what will George Bush think, or what will Barack Obama think? No. We're thinking, what will my mother think? What will my father think? What will the neighbours think? What will my mates think? What will the people at work think? In other words, what will other people who have chosen to live in this sheep pen think of me getting out of it? It's like sitting in a cell and you find a way out through the door, and instead of a prison warder coming along to stop you getting out, the other prisoners jump on you. And it's all about the control and programming of perception. That's the only way the few, and it is a few compared with the global population, that the billions can be controlled. Manipulating how we interact with reality, keeping from us that we are consciousness, putting us in these bubbles of our sense of limitation and I can't, manipulating the way we decode reality, and therefore making us see the world as the control system wants us to see it. That's the basis of all of it going through the day, because that's the basis of all of it going through the whole conspiracy. To understand the world that we live in. One seriously important aspect to this DNA, this hybrid DNA I'm talking about, is that it has eliminated what we call empathy. The ability to decode the emotion of empathy. Empathy is the fail-safe mechanism of all behavior. If I can empathize with the consequences for others of my actions, that limits and balances my actions. If I have no empathy because I cannot empathize, then there are no limits. There is nothing that won't do. 3,000 dead on 9/11, who cares? Who cares? That's what we're dealing with. And this is vital to get across. If we look at this information on the basis of thinking I wouldn't do that, so they wouldn't do it, then we're going to miss the plot completely. The only source of information they have to get a fix on who they are, where they are, world events, anything, is information, when you're in that five sense mode alone, coming through the eyes and the ears. And who controls that? The education system, the media, and peer pressure from people who've been through the education system and been programmed by the media. So once you're in that mode, you are little more than a computer terminal on an internet. But when you expand your awareness beyond that point, and you go beyond that limitation, you start to perceive things, you start to have insights, because now, although you're in this world in terms of your body and your experience of this reality, you're not of the world totally in terms of your perception of reality. And when people expand their consciousness and start to, in effect, look into the world instead of being in it and of it,
that's when you're called mad. That's when you're called crazy, because you are seeing a reality that most other people aren't seeing. And I've used this analogy before, but I think it just so explains where we are. We live in a madhouse. And if you're born in a madhouse and you grow up in a madhouse, madness to you is sanity. And people who come into the madhouse or can see beyond it and say, actually, this is a madhouse and this is why, those that can see only the madhouse, who think it's normal, that think it's sane, they think the people that can see beyond it are mad. This is what's gone on throughout human history. In the nature of reality and the way we interact with reality and the way that thought manifests as what we experience, I have this phrase: what we believe, we perceive, and what we perceive, we experience. If you can program someone to believe something, then that will become their reality. And if you can get people to take it on collectively, that will become the collective reality. It's very much like the stage hypnotist who puts a belief system or a belief in reality, that's what they're doing, into the mind of the stooge on the stage, and then the stooge on the stage experiences that, whether it's someone naked in the audience that isn't, whether there's an elephant in the audience but there isn't, whatever. That downloaded belief manifests as their experienced reality. And, you know, I've been watching this for years now, Alex.
Have this range of awareness into the true sense of what we are. You realize that David Icke is not who I am. Luke is not who you are. It's the name for a current experience of infinite awareness. And your infinite awareness and my infinite awareness is the same awareness. It's just got 2 points of attention. One's called Luke and one's called David. And once you realize that you are infinite awareness having an experience, then that knowledge can allow you to take control of the experience, because you know it is in your power to do that.
Conceived
constantly. And then, of course, these people will tell you all the news that those that own the media want you to believe is true. It's what news is. And the whole foundation of all of it is be afraid, be very afraid. The big bad monster is coming as soon as we've invented him. We're nowhere near the edge of what is possible and what is there to be known. But the norms are very powerful, especially when, from cradle to grave, we are constantly manipulated and confused with contradictory information, and when we're pressured to believe it, otherwise we'll get ridiculed or condemned for being different. And we are in a situation, a world brilliantly described by this man, Michael Elner. Just look at us. Everything is backwards. Everything is upside down. Doctors destroy health, lawyers destroy justice, universities destroy knowledge, governments destroy freedom, the major media destroys information, and religions destroy spirituality. That's where we are. Instead, we go official version of events, reported to the public, virtually unquestioned, and it becomes official history without question. At stage 2, you want the public to react with anger, with fear, with outrage, and you want them to say, basically, something must be done. What are they going to do about it? And then those who've created the problem, got that reaction, then change society openly through legislation to offer the solutions to the problems they have themselves covertly created. And that method alone has advanced this agenda through the centuries more than any other technique of manipulation. The 33rd degree of Freemasonry has this Latin motto, ordo ab chaos, order out of chaos, problem, reaction, solution. Create the chaos and then offer a new order, a new world order, which is the code name for this conspiracy. And God, it's coming out their mouths all over the place at the moment, isn't it? So what you have is a hidden hand where events are manipulated, like 9/11, which not just me, but endless other researchers now around the world have taken apart the official story. It insults the intelligence of a 10-year-old.
and you have a hidden hand manipulating events, and the whole goal of it is centralization of power to the point where humans are little more than controlled clones.
Who's the hidden hand? I mean, who are these hidden hands?
This network of families I'm talking about. You find that people that are in positions of apparent power, like prime ministers and presidents, are actually puppets of the real power, which doesn't put itself on public display. Why would it? I mean, does anyone really think that George W. Bush is running America? He probably couldn't tie his shoelaces, never mind run a country.
On the planet, this is why we're getting this mantra all the time now about international law. We must have international law. What is international law? It is a law that everyone on the planet has to obey, in theory anyway. And so if you want, which is what they do want, a world government, a world central bank, a world army, an amalgamation of NATO and the UN peacekeeping operation, a world currency, electronic, no cash, and a microchip population, then what you've got to do, and this is the way they work, a process I call problem, reaction, solution, you've got to keep creating the problems, get the people to react, do something in fear and outrage, oh, look what's happening, what they're going to do about it, and then they, who've covertly created the problem, offer the solutions to the problems they've created, which is the constant centralization of power. That's what all the solutions are. And we're seeing such a wonderful example now with what's happening in the financial industry.
Y pues bueno, mis conejos, ahí lo tienen. Ahí está toda esa información que nos habla David Icke. Sin duda tenemos que dedicarle otro video porque tiene muchos más. Tengo que hacer otra compilación. Y vamos a ir reforzando estos temas para que veas justo punto por punto de lo que David Icke nos está transmitiendo. Ha estado hablando durante años, lo que expone en sus libros, cómo es esa idea de la conciencia, de que nos cambian la conciencia, nos ponen en cierto nivel de conciencia para vibrar en cierta frecuencia. Y va elevándose todavía más por niveles en el cual es el propósito, ¿no? de todo esto, y siempre llega a planos más espirituales, más arriba, más elevados. Entonces, conejos, definitivamente podemos nosotros cambiar el sistema. Podemos cambiar la manera en la que habitamos este planeta. Podemos cambiar nuestras interacciones como humanos, nuestro entendimiento de la naturaleza de la realidad, de quiénes somos, nuestro propósito como humanos, como especie, el unirnos. Pero es poco a poco y es con amor. Sí, con miedo, el miedo siempre va a estar ahí presente, pero tú escoges qué camino quieres recorrer, si el del amor o el del miedo. Ya vimos cómo el sistema nos pone siempre en el camino del miedo, nos están generando miedo para que ellos sean nuestra solución, cuando en realidad son el mismo problema. Entonces, conejos, si vamos desenmascarando al sistema que solo beneficia a los que están hasta arriba de la pirámide, pues podemos cambiar la manera en la que los humanos habitamos este planeta, ser más espirituales, estar más conectados con la naturaleza, unos con otros, tener más empatía, más amor incondicional, entender qué hacemos aquí realmente y seguir investigando científicamente sin caer en que el sistema educativo nos está diciendo la verdad absoluta, romper nuestros paradigmas. Entonces, cambiemos el sistema del dinero y vivamos de la manera que sabemos que tenemos que estar viviendo. Porque sabemos que somos un fractal de la fuente primordial que es Dios, experimentándose a sí mismo. Todos somos el mismo ser. Entonces, cuando entiendes eso, tienes más empatía por los demás, porque sabes que tú eres ellos. Simplemente están separados en diferentes perspectivas, diferentes realidades, pero todos venimos del mismo mar. Todos venimos de lo mismo. Entonces, eso nos une como humanos en vez de estar peleando con ingeniería social que nos mete el sistema, feminismo, hombres contra mujeres, como siempre, haciéndonos pelear. Metiéndonos noticias de miedo de Estados Unidos, invade Venezuela, mientras queman Chile, mientras queman Argentina, en el Amazonas. Siempre están actuando de la misma manera las logias Illuminati. Problema, reacción, solución. Metiéndonos este circo que es el gobierno, que es la política, que son las bombas, que son las guerras, por aquí, por allá, mientras ellos hacen sus rituales, sacrificando niños o quemando lugares estratégicos para después construir, o ve tú a saber la energía que emite ese lugar, los templos que tiene, las líneas ley del planeta. Entonces, dejemos de caer en la narrativa del sistema, del miedo, y empecemos a vivir esa vida que sabemos que tenemos que estar viviendo, conejos. El sistema del dinero es un sistema que podemos cambiar totalmente. Poco a poco, conejos, les mando un fuerte abrazo. Déjame en los comentarios qué opinas de lo que dice David Icke, si te gustaría ver una segunda parte de David Icke y todo esto que nos explica. Échale un vistazo a sus libros y déjame un comentario, deja tu like. Muchas gracias, conejos. Bye bye.